I'm Madison Reynolds, 28, and until that Thanksgiving dinner, I'd been quietly tolerating my family's disappointment in me for years. Growing up in a family of overachievers, I was always the black sheep, the one who never quite measured up. But when my father slammed his fist on our antique mahogany table and called me the biggest disgrace to this family in front of everyone, something inside me finally broke. What happened next changed everything, for them and for me. Before I tell you how I completely transformed my life after that devastating dinner, drop a comment letting me know where you're watching from. Hit like and subscribe if you've ever felt like you didn't belong in your own family, and stick around to see how I turned the worst insult of my life into my greatest motivation. The Reynolds name carried weight in Boston. Not celebrity weight, but old money, social connections, and multi-generational success weight. The kind of family where holiday cards featured perfect smiles in front of perfect homes, and where accomplishments were measured in prestigious degrees and career advancements. My father, Richard Reynolds, wasn't just a corporate lawyer. He was a partner at one of Boston's oldest firms, representing clients whose names appeared in the Wall Street Journal regularly. His father had been a judge, his grandfather a state senator. The Reynolds men built legacies, not careers. My mother, Eleanor, came from the Bancroft family, a banking dynasty with roots going back to the 1800s. She'd given up a promising career in finance when she married my father, instead channeling her organizational skills into chairing charity galas and maintaining our family's social calendar. Her events were mentioned in Boston Magazine, her outfits always impeccable, her smile practiced to perfection. Then there were my siblings, the golden children. My brother William, for years older, had followed the Reynolds roadmap flawlessly. Phillips Exeter Academy, then Harvard undergraduate, Harvard Law, and now junior partner at a prestigious firm. At family gatherings, conversations revolved around his latest high-profile case or the important people he'd met. My sister Catherine, 2 years my senior, was the perfect daughter in every way. She'd graduated top of her class in medical school and was now a rising star surgeon at Massachusetts General. She'd recently gotten engaged to a congressman's son who was himself on track for political office. My mother couldn't stop talking about the wedding plans and how the governor might attend. And then there was me. From an early age, it was clear I was different. While Catherine practiced piano for hours and William memorized debate arguments, I was drawing in my sketchbooks or writing stories. My parents viewed these interests as cute hobbies that I'd eventually outgrow when it was time to focus on real achievements. Madison, darling, it's wonderful that you enjoy art, but let's focus on your science grades. The Reynolds women are accomplished, not artsy, my mother would say, closing my sketchbook and pushing a textbook toward me. My childhood was a series of carefully selected extracurriculars designed to build the perfect college application. Tennis lessons, I was terrible. Debate club, I hated it. Volunteer work at my mother's charity, where I was relegated to stuffing envelopes because my social skills weren't polished enough. When I showed talent in creative writing, it was dismissed as not practical. You can write novels in your spare time after law school, my father said when I won a statewide essay contest in high school. He didn't attend the award ceremony. He had an important client dinner. The micromanagement extended to my appearance, too. My mother regularly scheduled hair appointments for me without asking, took me shopping for clothes I didn't like but that were appropriate for a Reynolds, and once threw away my favorite concert t-shirts while I was at school, replacing them with cashmere sweaters and pastels. The path laid out for me was clear: graduate from an Ivy League college, preferably Harvard, like my siblings, pursue law or medicine, marry someone from the right social circle, live in the right neighborhood, join the right clubs, have the right number of children, and raise them to continue the Reynolds tradition of excellence. But I disappointed them from the start. Despite my good grades, I wasn't valedictorian like Catherine. I got into Brown instead of Harvard. Prestigious, but still a family disappointment. And then I committed the ultimate sin. I majored in marketing instead of pre-law or pre-med. Marketing? Like advertisements, my mother had asked, her voice dripping with disdain when I told them my choice. That's what people do when they can't get into real programs. My father was more direct. You're throwing away generations of opportunity for billboards and jingles. After college, I really broke the mold. Instead of returning to Boston, I moved to Chicago for a job at a mid-sized marketing firm. My parents told their friends I was finding myself and would come to my senses soon. When I didn't, they began applying pressure. Madison, Stuart Whitman's firm, is expanding their corporate communications department. His daughter went to Brown too, my mother would say during our weekly obligatory phone calls. I've already mentioned you might be interested. Dad knows the dean at Harvard Law. Late applications can be overlooked for the right candidate, my father would add. Each family gathering became an exercise in deflection and forced smiles as relatives asked why I wasn't settled yet. My cousins who had followed the approved life script received toasts at family dinners. My accomplishments, like landing a major client for my firm or getting a promotion, were acknowledged with tight smiles and quick subject changes. That's nice, dear. Did you hear Catherine received a research grant? My mother would pivot. As the years passed, the tension only grew. My visits home became shorter and less frequent. Each time, I arrived with a knot in my stomach that didn't dissolve until I was on the plane back to Chicago. Each time, I swore I wouldn't let their disapproval affect me. Each time, it did anyway. By the time I was 28, we had settled into a cold war of sorts. They had seemingly accepted that I was a disappointment, but still held out hope I would grow up, eventually. I had accepted that I would never receive their approval, but still craved it deep down. And then came the Thanksgiving that changed everything. The drive from Logan Airport to Beacon Hill was familiar yet increasingly dreadful each time I made it. My parents' brownstone stood exactly as it always had, imposing, perfect, with tasteful holiday decorations that looked professionally installed, because they were. The wreath on the door probably cost more than my monthly rent in Chicago. I sat in my rental car for 10 extra minutes, gripping the steering wheel, rehearsing responses to the inevitable questions about my job, my love life, my future plans. I checked my reflection in the mirror, hair straightened the way my mother preferred, minimal makeup that wouldn't draw criticism, the conservative sweater and pearls that were my armor for family gatherings. Just get through the weekend, I whispered to myself. Smile, deflect, escape. The front door opened before I could even ring the bell. My mother stood there, elegant as always in a cashmere sweater set and perfectly tailored slacks. Madison, you're late. Everyone's already here, she said, air kissing near my cheek. Your hair looks interesting. Did you get some sun? Your foundation seems a shade off. And so it began. The living room was a scene from a glossy magazine, fire crackling in the fireplace, tasteful autumn-themed decorations, the scent of cinnamon and roasting turkey in the air. My brother William stood by the bar cart, mixing drinks with his wife Rachel, who worked at a prestigious consulting firm. They were the perfect power couple, complete with matching Harvard alumni watches. Maddie. Looking casual as always, William said, his smile not quite reaching his eyes. Scotch? Oh wait, you still drink those fruity cocktails, right? Wine is fine, thanks, I replied, forcing a smile. Catherine was holding court on the sofa, showing off her enormous engagement ring to our grandmother. She waved when she saw me, her smile genuine but distracted. Madison, come see the ring. Thomas proposed at the governor's summer home on the Cape. It was so romantic, she gushed, then lowered her voice. I saved you a seat away from Aunt Helen. She's on one of her matchmaking kicks again. That was Catherine, simultaneously showing off and trying to protect me. She followed all the family rules, but still had moments of real sisterly affection. Thanks, I said, squeezing her hand. The ring is beautiful. Congratulations again. And I have more news, she whispered. I got the promotion. Head of cardiothoracic surgery. Dad's planning a toast at dinner. My stomach sank. Another family dinner, another celebration of my siblings' accomplishments while I sat quietly trying to become invisible. The pre-dinner mingling was the usual obstacle course of passive-aggressive comments and loaded questions. Still at that little marketing company, Madison. It wasn't little. We had offices in 3 cities. No serious boyfriend yet? You know, you won't be young forever. I had broken up with Jason 3 months ago after realizing we wanted different futures. Chicago must be interesting, though I could never leave Boston. Real culture, you know. This from an aunt who considered traveling to Providence an exotic journey. By the time we gathered around the dining table, a massive antique passed down through generations of Reynolds, I had already finished 2 glasses of wine and was contemplating a third. The table setting was impeccable, of course. My mother's finest china, crystal glassware that rang like bells when touched, silver flatware that had to be hand-polished by her housekeeper. Name cards in calligraphy marked our assigned seats. Mine, I noticed, was at the far end, next to my 12-year-old cousin and away from the important conversations. My father stood at the head of the table, commanding attention without even raising his voice. Richard Reynolds was still handsome at 65, with silver hair and the confident posture of a man who had never been told he couldn't have something. Before we enjoy this magnificent meal Eleanor has prepared for us, he began, conveniently forgetting to mention the caterers who had actually prepared everything. I'd like to raise a glass to family accomplishments. What followed was a detailed account of William's latest legal victory, Catherine's promotion and engagement, various cousins' achievements, and even a nod to my 14-year-old nephew's middle school debate championship. My name never came up. The dinner itself was delicious but tense, at least for me. I pushed food around my plate, answering questions with practiced brevity, trying to stay under the radar. But of course, eventually, attention turned to me. "So Madison," my father said during a lull in conversation, "still at that little marketing firm?" "Yes, Dad. Though we've grown significantly this year. I'm leading our new tech division now," I replied, a small part of me still hoping for approval. He nodded dismissively. "Speaking of tech, William just brought in that new software company as a client. What was it called, son?" "The one valued at several billion." And just like that, my small accomplishment was swept aside. My mother, ever attuned to social dynamics, decided to change the subject, unfortunately to one even worse. "Madison, whatever happened to that boy you were seeing? Jason, was it? From the good Chicago family." "We broke up 3 months ago, Mom. We wanted different things," I said quietly. "What a shame. He seemed so nice. And his family has that lovely summer home in Lake Forest," she sighed. "Well, you're not getting any younger, dear." "I'm only 28, Mom." "When I was 28, I already had 2 children and was chairing the hospital benefit," she reminded me. "Times are different now," I tried. "Values shouldn't be," my father interjected. "Speaking of careers, Madison, John Whitmore asked about you the other day." John Whitmore was my father's college roommate who now ran a large financial services firm. His company is looking for someone to head their marketing department. A real opportunity to finally work somewhere substantial. I told him you'd call him after the holidays. I put down my fork. "Dad, I didn't agree to that." "Don't be difficult, Madison. It's a favor I called in specifically for you. But I don't want to work in financial services. And actually, I took a deep breath. I've been planning to tell you all. I'm starting my own agency in the new year. I've already got 2 clients lined up and..." My father's hand came down hard on the table, making the crystal glasses jump. "Your own agency? With what experience? What connections?" "This is exactly your problem, Madison. Half-baked ideas with no follow-through. John is offering you a real career, not some entrepreneurial fantasy." "It's not a fantasy. I've been planning this for a year. I have savings, a business plan. So you can barely support yourself now, and you want to throw away a real opportunity to struggle even more," my mother interjected. "Honestly, Madison, sometimes I don't understand you at all." "You've never tried to understand me," I said, my voice rising despite my best efforts. "Neither of you have. You decided who I should be before I was even born, and you've never forgiven me for being someone else." The table fell silent. Even the cousins stopped eating, sensing the tension. "That's enough," my father said coldly. "You will not speak to your mother that way." "I'm not speaking anyway. I'm just finally saying the truth. I'm not Catherine or William. I never will be. But that doesn't make my choices wrong." My father's face had turned an alarming shade of red. "Your choices? Your choices have been one disappointment after another. The wrong school, the wrong major, the wrong career, the wrong city. And now you want to throw away a genuine opportunity one arranged for you to, what? Play at being a businesswoman." I'm not playing at anything, I said, feeling years of suppressed emotions rising to the surface. I'm good at what I do. I've worked hard. Just because it doesn't fit your narrow definition of success. Success, my father exploded, rising from his chair. You call what you're doing success? Living in a tiny apartment in Chicago, working for people half as smart as you are, dating men with no prospects? While your brother and sister are actually building legacies. Richard, my mother warned, glancing nervously at our relatives. But he was beyond stopping now. I've held my tongue for years, Madison, watching you waste your potential. The Reynolds name means something in this city. Your grandfather built a reputation that opened doors for all of us, and what have you done with those opportunities? Nothing. You're the biggest disgrace to this family I've ever seen. The words hung in the air like poison. I looked around the table. My mother was staring at her plate. William looked uncomfortable but didn't speak up. Catherine was the only one who seemed disturbed, reaching toward me across the table. Madison, she started. But I was already standing up. Napkin dropped on my barely touched meal. Thank you for making your feelings so clear, Dad, I said, my voice shaking but determined. I won't burden this family with my disgraceful presence any longer. I grabbed my coat from the hallway closet, ignoring my mother's calls to come back, and stepped out into the cold Boston night. I didn't know where I was driving, just that I needed to get away. Tears blurred my vision as I navigated Boston streets on autopilot, the words "biggest disgrace" echoing in my head like a terrible song I couldn't stop playing. This wasn't the first time my father had expressed disappointment in me. There was the time I chose Brown over Harvard, setting for mediocrity already, Madison. The time I switched from pre-law to marketing, throwing away your future for a trendy major. The countless career moves he'd dismissed, relationships he'd undermined, life choices he'd belittled. But biggest disgrace to this family, that was new. That was final. That was the culmination of 28 years of never being enough. I found myself parking near Boston Harbor, the place I'd always gone as a teenager when family pressure became too much. Even in November, with the bitter wind coming off the water, there was something calming about watching the harbor lights reflected on the dark surface. I sat on a cold bench, pulling my coat tighter around me, and finally let myself cry without restraint. Deep, body-shaking sobs that released years of pent-up pain and rejection. What hurt most wasn't just my father's words, but the silence that followed them. No one defended me. No one objected. They all just sat there, tacitly agreeing that yes, Madison Reynolds was indeed a family disgrace. My phone buzzed in my pocket. A text from my mother. You're embarrassing us by leaving like that. Come back and apologize to your father. Not, are you okay? Not, your father was out of line. Just concern about appearances, as always. 10 minutes later, a call from Catherine. Maddie, where are you? Dad's calmed down now. If you just apologize for the startup thing, we can all enjoy dessert. I declined the call. The harbor lights blurred through my tears as memories flooded back. My art being removed from the refrigerator to make room for Catherine's perfect test scores. My father missing my college graduation because of an important case. The family photo sessions where I was repeatedly told to stand differently, smile differently, be different. My whole life had been a series of attempts to contort myself into a Madison-shaped version of Catherine or William. And it had never worked because I wasn't them. I'd never be them. As the cold seeped through my coat and the wind whipped my hair around my face, something shifted inside me. A clarity I'd never experienced before. I didn't need their approval. I never had. The family I'd been killing myself trying to please would never be pleased with me because they didn't want me. They wanted another Catherine, another William. Another person who would follow the Reynolds blueprint without question. I pulled out my phone and booked a hotel room downtown. There was no way I was going back to that house tonight, or maybe ever again. Then I turned off my phone entirely, not wanting to see any more messages demanding apologies I wasn't going to give. The Marriott was impersonal but peaceful. In the quiet of room 718, I ordered room service, and then did something I'd never done before. I took out the hotel notepad and began writing down every hurtful thing my family had ever said to me. You'd be so pretty if you lost 10 pounds. Mom, age 14. Why can't you apply yourself like your sister? Dad, age 16. Brown is a safety school for people who couldn't get into Harvard. William, age 18. Marketing is for people who couldn't handle real majors. Dad, age 20. That boyfriend isn't Reynolds material. Mom, ages 22, 24, 26, 28. Page after page, year after year of subtle and not-so-subtle put-downs, criticisms, and dismissals. By the time I finished, it was 3 a.m., and I had filled 7 pages of the small notepad. I stared at the pages, this documented history of being told I wasn't enough. And suddenly, I was angry. Not the fleeting anger I usually suppress to keep the peace, but a profound, righteous anger that burned away my remaining desire for their approval. Why had I spent so many years trying to please people who couldn't love me for who I actually was? I fell into an exhausted sleep around dawn and woke up to sunlight streaming through unfamiliar curtains. For a moment, I felt the familiar weight of dread about facing my family. Then I remembered, I didn't have to face them. Not today. Not ever again if I didn't want to. The realization was both terrifying and exhilarating. I ordered breakfast and turned my phone back on. 12 missed calls and 27 text messages. I scrolled through them without reading and then did something unprecedented. I blocked my parents' numbers. I kept Catherine unblocked. She at least had shown some concern. Sitting cross-legged on the hotel bed, eating overpriced room service waffles, I made a decision that would change the trajectory of my life. I was done trying to be a Reynolds by their definition. From now on, I would be Madison Reynolds by my own definition. I checked out of the hotel, drove straight to Logan Airport, and changed my flight to leave that afternoon instead of Sunday. Before boarding, I sent one text to Catherine. I'm okay. Going back to Chicago early. We'll call you next week. Please don't tell Mom and Dad. As the plane lifted off from Boston, I felt something lifting from my shoulders too. The weight of expectations I'd never asked for and could never fulfill. I was going back to Chicago not as a failure running from family disappointment, but as a woman finally free to become herself. The Chicago winter was brutal that year, but I barely noticed. I was too busy dismantling my old life and building a new one. First, I quit my job. My boss, Amanda, was shocked when I handed in my resignation just 3 days after Thanksgiving. Madison, you're on track for promotion in the spring. Is this about money? Because we can discuss. It's not about money, I explained. It's about finally doing what I've been planning for years. I'm starting my own agency. Her expression shifted from confusion to concern. That's a big risk. The market's competitive right now. I know, but I need to do this. For me. I had enough savings to cover 6 months of expenses if I was careful. I downsized from my already modest apartment to an even smaller studio in a less trendy neighborhood, cutting my rent by 1/3. The new place was tiny, basically one room with a kitchenette and a bathroom, but it had good natural light and enough space to set up a desk by the window. This would be my office until I could afford a real one. The first month was a flurry of paperwork, registering my business, setting up accounts, creating a website, designing business cards. I named the company Authentic Edge Marketing, a reminder of the authenticity I was reclaiming in my own life. My business plan targeted small to mid-sized creative businesses that needed marketing help but couldn't afford the big agencies. My pitch was simple. I understood how to make unique voices heard in a crowded marketplace because I'd finally found my own. Reality hit hard in January. Cold calling potential clients was nothing like I'd imagined. For every 20 calls, I might get one person willing to listen to my pitch. For every 10 pitches, maybe one would express interest. And even that interest rarely converted to an actual client. By February, I was eating ramen noodles more nights than not, making my coffee at home instead of buying it, and calculating exactly how many months of runway I had left if things didn't improve. The answer was increasingly depressing. Doubt crept in during the long winter nights. Maybe my father was right. Maybe this was just a fantasy. Maybe I wasn't cut out for entrepreneurship. Maybe I should swallow my pride and call John Whitmore about that corporate job. The lowest point came on a gray Tuesday when I had 3 pitch meetings scheduled and all 3 canceled. I came home to my cold studio, looked at my sad little desk covered in business plans and marketing strategies that no one wanted to buy, and broke down. For one weak moment, I considered calling my parents. They would help financially, with strings attached, of course. The money would come with "I told you so" and "time to grow up and come back to Boston where you belong." Instead, I called my therapist, Dr. Lena, whom I'd started seeing in December specifically to deal with my family issues. "Madison, what you're experiencing is normal for any entrepreneur," she assured me after I poured out my fears. "But I'm concerned that you're connecting business setbacks with your worth as a person. That's the pattern from your family you're trying to break, remember?" She was right. I was falling into the same trap, just with different metrics. Instead of measuring my worth by the Reynolds yardstick, I was now measuring it by client acquisitions and bank balances. "Your business might succeed or it might fail," Dr. Lena continued. "But neither outcome determines your value. You took a risk based on your authentic desires. That courage has inherent worth, regardless of the results." That night, I reframed my thinking. I wasn't just building a business, I was rebuilding myself. And that project was already succeeding, even on days when the business wasn't. The turning point came at a networking event I almost didn't attend because I couldn't really afford the ticket. A woman named Rebecca, who owned a successful PR firm, overheard my conversation with a potential client. "Your approach to storytelling is refreshing," she said afterward, handing me her card. "Most marketers talk metrics and ROI right away. You talked about authentic voice and meaningful connection." Rebecca became not just my first real client, but my mentor. Over coffee meetings she insisted on paying for, she reviewed my proposals, made introductions, and shared hard-earned wisdom. "Your pricing is too low," she told me bluntly during one meeting. "You're competing on price when you should be competing on value. Charge what you're worth, not what you think people will pay." With Rebecca's guidance and referrals, I landed 2 more clients by March. Small contracts, but stable ones. Enough to extend my runway and boost my confidence. Around this time, I also began building what Dr. Lena called my chosen family, people who supported me as I actually was, not as they wished me to be. There was Zoe from my apartment building, a graphic designer who traded logo work for my marketing advice. Marcus from the co-working space I occasionally used, a web developer who became both a friend and a technical resource. Taylor and James, a couple I met at a business workshop who invited me to dinner parties where conversation flowed easily and no one asked why I wasn't married yet. My family tried to contact me throughout this period. My mother's voicemails grew increasingly dramatic. "Your father had to take blood pressure medication because of the stress you're causing." My father's emails alternated between commanding, "Call home immediately," and dismissive, "This childish behavior is exactly why we worry about your judgment." I read them but didn't respond. Catherine was different. After I finally called her as promised, we established a new kind of relationship, tentative, but more honest than before. "They talk about you like you've joined a cult or something," she told me during one call. "Mom keeps saying, when Madison comes to her senses. Dad's pretending you don't exist, which honestly might be better." "Are you still the golden child?" I asked, trying to keep my tone light. She paused. "I'm starting to see what you mean about the pressure. Now that you're gone, it's all on me and William. And he's feeling it too. His wife wants to move to California, but Dad keeps saying Reynolds men build Boston legacies. Do you ever think about leaving?" I asked. Another pause. "Sometimes. But I actually do love my job and Thomas. Just, maybe not all the expectations that come with them." It was the most real conversation we'd ever had. April brought a key moment in my business journey. A networking event connected me with Natalie Chin, a data analytics expert who complemented my creative strengths perfectly. We clicked immediately, staying at the venue talking long after everyone else had left. "I've been wanting to leave my corporate job," she confessed over late-night diner coffee. "But starting from scratch is terrifying." "It is," I agreed. "But also liberating in ways I never expected." 2 weeks and several meetings later, we formalized a partnership. Natalie would bring her technical expertise and corporate connections. I'd bring my creative approach and existing clients. Together, We rebranded as Reynolds Chin Strategic Marketing. Seeing my name on the business cards, my name, not as an extension of my family, but as a reflection of my work, was one of the proudest moments of my life. In May, we landed our first major client, a tech startup with actual venture funding. The contract wasn't huge, but it was significant enough to allow us to lease a small office space and hire a part-time assistant. Standing in our new office, just a converted loft with secondhand furniture and 2 bright fluorescent lighting, I felt a sense of accomplishment no family approval could have given me. I had built this from nothing, after being told I would amount to nothing. As spring turned to summer, both the business and my personal healing continued to grow. Some days were still hard, some clients still difficult, some old family voices still loud in my head. But the trajectory was undeniably upward. And then one day in June, I received a thick envelope in the mail. Inside was a magazine, Boston Business Quarterly, open to a page with a post-it note attached. The article was titled Rising Marketing Stars Under 30, and there, in a small sidebar feature, was my name and a quote from our tech client about our innovative approach. The post-it note read, "Saw this and thought of you. Your father, and I would like to speak with you. Love, Mom." Just like that, the familiar anxiety returned. They were only reaching out now that there was external validation they understood, my name in print, in a business publication no less. Now I was worthy of their attention again. I brought the magazine to my next therapy session. "What do you want to do about this?" Dr. Lena asked. Part of me wants to ignore it, I admitted. But another part still craves their approval, she suggested gently. I think I just want closure, I realized. To see them as adults equals, not as the all-powerful figures from my childhood. Dr. Lena nodded. That's a healthy perspective. Just remember, you can set the terms of any meeting. You're not that powerless child anymore. After much consideration, I agreed to meet my parents during their upcoming visit to Chicago for a medical conference. I suggested a coffee shop, neutral territory, public, time-limited. When they walked in, I was struck by how ordinary they looked. My father's hair had more gray than I remembered. My mother seemed smaller somehow. They were just people. Flawed, complicated people who had done their best according to their own limited understanding. That realization didn't excuse their behavior, but it helped me see them more clearly. You look well, my mother said after awkward greetings were exchanged. Chicago agrees with you. You've lost weight, she added, because some things never change. My father cleared his throat. We saw the magazine piece. Impressive to get that kind of recognition so quickly. Thank you, I said simply. Your business partner, Chen, is she related to the Boston Chens? Banking family? My mother asked. No. She's from California. Her parents are professors. My father nodded, then got to his point. Now that you're establishing yourself, it might be time to think about strategic expansion. I know several people in Boston who could open doors for you. The Reynolds name still means something there. And there it was. They hadn't changed at all. My success was only valuable if it could be folded back into their vision. Dad, I appreciate the offer, but we're focusing on the Chicago and Milwaukee markets for now. Our growth strategy is based on our client needs, not geographic preferences. His face tightened. Madison, you've always had this self-defeating tendency to turn down advantages. It's not self-defeating to build something on my own terms, I interrupted, feeling surprisingly calm. I'm proud of what I've created. Of course you are, dear, my mother interjected. But your father is just trying to help you reach your full potential. I took a deep breath. My full potential as I define it, or as you define it. Don't be difficult, Madison, my father said sharply. I'm not being difficult. I'm being direct. For years, I tried to be the person you wanted me to be, and it made me miserable. I'm finally building a life that makes me happy. I would love for you to be part of that life, but only if you can accept me as I am, not as a project to fix. My mother looked genuinely confused. But darling, we only want what's best for you. No, Mom. You want what you think is best for me. There's a difference. The conversation continued in circles, with my parents unable or unwilling to hear what I was actually saying. After 30 minutes, I realized this meeting wasn't going to provide the closure I'd hoped for. As I stood to leave, my father reached for my arm. "Madison, don't walk away again. Family is family." I looked him in the eye. "You're right. Family is family. But that doesn't give you the right to dictate my life. When you're ready to know the real me, not the daughter you wish you had, I'll be here." I walked out of the coffee shop feeling both sad and liberated. The meeting hadn't gone as I'd hoped, but I'd spoken my truth without anger or apology. The little girl desperate for daddy's approval was finally growing up. Back at the office, I threw myself into work with renewed focus. I didn't need their validation anymore. I was finding my own. And as summer turned to fall, that validation came in unexpected ways. A client referring another client. Natalie and I completing a challenging project ahead of schedule. A small but meaningful mention in a local business blog. These were my successes. Mine alone. And they were enough. 1 year after the fateful Thanksgiving dinner, Authentic Edge Marketing, we'd reverted to our original name, had grown beyond my wildest expectations. We had 5 full-time employees, a real office in a converted warehouse in Chicago's West Loop, and a client list that included 2 major tech startups and several established mid-sized businesses. I'd settled into a leadership role that felt both challenging and natural. My employees seemed to genuinely respect me, not because of my family name or connections, but because of my skills and vision. This was a new kind of validation I'd never experienced in Boston. The annual Marketing Industry Awards were approaching, and Natalie had secretly nominated our work for the tech startup Meridian for Best Integrated Campaign by a small agency. When we received the notification that we were finalists, the whole office celebrated with champagne. "You built this," Natalie said, clinking her glass against mine. "A year ago, this was just an idea in your head." "We built this," I corrected her. "I couldn't have done it without you." The award ceremony was scheduled for the same week as Thanksgiving, a coincidence that didn't escape my notice. I had politely declined my mother's tentative invitation to come home for the holiday, explaining I had business commitments. I didn't mention the awards. I didn't want to give them another opportunity to minimize my accomplishments. 3 days before the ceremony, a thick envelope arrived at the office. Inside was a glossy copy of Chicago Business Monthly with a yellow sticky note marking page 42. There, under the headline "Chicago's Marketing Mavens, 10 Agencies Reshaping the Industry," was a full-page profile of Authentic Edge, including a photo of me and Natalie standing in our office. The sticky note simply read, "Your father and I would like to speak with you. Love, Mom." I sighed, experiencing a sense of déjà vu. The last time they'd reached out after seeing me in a magazine, the resulting meeting had been disappointing at best. But something about this felt different. The magazine had been delivered to my office, not my apartment, meaning they had taken the time to find my business address. And there was no immediate attempt to redirect my success back to Boston or the Reynolds network. After discussing it with Dr. Lena, I decided to call my mother. Our conversation was stilted but civil. They were coming to Chicago for a medical fundraiser and wanted to have dinner. I agreed but suggested we meet after the award ceremony. I didn't tell them about the event, but I did say I had an important business function that night. The awards ceremony was held at a downtown hotel ballroom, all glittering lights and industry networking. I wore a red dress, a color my mother had always said was too bold for my complexion, and felt confident in a way I never had at Boston social events. When they announced Authentic Edge Marketing as the winner for Best Integrated Campaign, the surge of pride was overwhelming. Standing at the podium, accepting the glass trophy with Natalie beside me, I scanned the audience out of habit, half expecting to see my family's disapproving faces. Instead, I saw my team cheering wildly, genuine pride in their expressions. I saw colleagues from other agencies applauding with respect. I saw the client from Meridian giving a thumbs up. These were my people. This was my world now. The after-party ran late, and I was still riding the high of our win when I arrived at my apartment to find a text from Catherine. "Congrats on the award. Mom and Dad saw it on social media. They're actually impressed, though Dad's pretending not to be. See you at dinner tomorrow." I stared at my phone in shock. Catherine knew about the award? My parents had seen it? And they were impressed? The next day, I met my parents at a restaurant I'd chosen, not the most expensive in Chicago, but one that showcased local ingredients and had won several culinary awards. I arrived early, nervous, but composed in a professional outfit that was stylish by Chicago standards, but would probably seem casual to my mother. They arrived exactly on time, my father in his usual tailored suit, my mother in a designer dress I recognized from her favorite Boston boutique. But something was subtly different. They seemed less imposing somehow. "Madison," my father said, extending his hand formally. "Congratulations on your award. Very impressive for a young agency." "Thank you," I replied, genuinely surprised by the acknowledgement. "The magazine article was well written," my mother added. "Though I wish they'd used a better photographer. The lighting didn't do you justice." I suppressed a smile. Some things never changed. Dinner was surprisingly pleasant. They asked questions about the business that seemed genuinely interested rather than judgmental. My father even nodded approvingly when I explained our growth strategy. "Conservative but smart," he commented. "Building a solid foundation before expanding." The real surprise came with dessert. "Your sister tells me you've refused to speak to us this past year," my father said, his tone careful rather than accusatory. "I needed space," I replied simply. After Thanksgiving last year, it was clear we had very different ideas about my life. My mother looked down at her untouched chocolate cake. Perhaps we were overly concerned with certain expectations. Coming from Eleanor Reynolds, this was practically an apology. "We've had some perspective this year," my father continued. "William and Rachel are divorcing." This was news to me. "I'm sorry to hear that." "Don't be. She's been unfaithful, apparently for some time. With her boss." My father's expression was grim. William was following every step of the Reynolds plan. Harvard, law, proper marriage. And it still fell apart. Meanwhile, my mother added, "You've built something impressive on your own terms. It's made us reconsider some things." I was stunned. This was the closest my parents had ever come to admitting they might be wrong. "I won't pretend I understand all your choices," my father said, reverting to his more typical tone. "But the results speak for themselves. You've shown determination." From Richard Reynolds, this was high praise indeed. The evening ended cordially, with tentative plans to meet again the next time they were in Chicago. As we said goodbye outside the restaurant, my mother actually hugged me, a brief, awkward embrace, but physical contact nonetheless. "We're proud of you, Madison," she whispered. In our way. I didn't cry until I was alone in my apartment. They weren't tears of joy exactly. Our relationship was still too damaged for that, but of relief. A door that I thought had permanently closed was now slightly ajar. The next morning, I received a surprising call from my brother William. "So you saw Mom and Dad," he said without preamble. "Yes. They told me about you and Rachel." "I'm sorry, Will." He was quiet for a moment. "Don't be. It's been a long time coming." "She's not happy." "I'm not happy. We've just been going through the motions because it's what was expected." "That doesn't make it easier," I said. "No." He paused. "Listen, Maddie. I owe you an apology. When Dad said those things last Thanksgiving, I should have spoken up. I didn't because I was a coward." "You were being a Reynolds," I said, without bitterness. "Yeah, following the script." He sighed heavily. "The thing is, I'm starting to think the script sucks. Rachel's leaving made me realize I've been living someone else's idea of my life. And watching you build something that actually makes you happy, it's made me question some things." We talked for over an hour, the most honest conversation we'd ever had. William admitted he'd never really wanted to be a lawyer, but couldn't imagine disappointing our father. He confessed to panic attacks before big cases, to drinking too much to cope with the stress, to envying my courage in walking away. "I don't know what I want," he admitted. "But for the first time, I'm allowing myself to ask the question." "That's the first step," I told him. "It gets both easier and harder from there." After that call, something shifted in my family dynamics. Catherine and I continued our more authentic sisterly relationship. William called regularly, updating me on his therapy progress and tentative steps toward change. My parents remained my parents, critical, traditional, sometimes difficult, but with a new undercurrent of grudging respect. I maintained my boundaries, building my business and personal life in Chicago. I started dating Daniel, a documentary filmmaker I met through a client, who found my family stories fascinating from an anthropological perspective and who loved my independence rather than feeling threatened by it. The business continued to thrive. We hired more staff, moved to a larger office, landed bigger clients. Each success felt meaningful because it was earned on my terms, not handed to me because of my last name. As we approached the second anniversary of the infamous Thanksgiving dinner, I received an unexpected email from Chicago Business Monthly. They wanted to feature me in their annual 30 Under 30 issue, highlighting young entrepreneurs who were changing the business landscape. The photo shoot was scheduled, the interview completed, and in late October, the issue hit newsstands with my picture and profile prominently featured. I bought several copies, sending one to Catherine and another to William. I didn't send one to my parents. I didn't need to. The day after publication, I received a text from my mother. Lovely article. Your father has ordered copies for his partners. A week later, I received an invitation to speak at a prestigious marketing conference. The event was scheduled for early December, in Boston. After some consideration, I accepted. It would be my first professional appearance in my hometown, an opportunity to showcase my success on the very ground where I'd once been deemed a failure. I didn't tell my family I was coming. This was my moment, not a family occasion. But as I took the stage at the Boston Convention Center, I glanced out at the audience and froze. There, in the third row, sat my entire family: father, mother, Catherine, even William, who had flown in from New York. They hadn't come to judge or criticize or remind me of my place in the family hierarchy. They had come to listen, to witness, perhaps even to learn. As I delivered my presentation on authentic marketing in the digital age, I felt a strange sense of completion. I wasn't speaking to impress them or earn their approval. I was speaking as the professional I had become, sharing expertise I had earned. And when the applause came at the end, I stood tall, neither diminished nor defined by their presence. The biggest disgrace to the family had become someone they could no longer dismiss. Not because I had followed their path, but because I had forged my own. 2 years after being called the biggest disgrace to my family, I stood in our Chicago office watching our team of 20 people bustling around, preparing for our biggest client pitch yet. The space was unrecognizable from our humble beginnings: modern furnishings, glass-walled conference rooms, our logo prominently displayed in the reception area. Natalie approached, tablet in hand. Final presentation looks great. The Archer team is going to love it. Archer Industries was a national retail chain looking to revamp their entire digital presence, the kind of client we couldn't have dreamed of approaching 2 years ago. Now they had sought us out, impressed by our work for a smaller competitor. Did you see this? Natalie handed me her tablet, open to an industry publication. There it was: Authentic Edge Marketing had won Agency of the Year in the boutique category. Our third major award this year. The ceremony's next month in New York, she said. We should bring the whole leadership team. I nodded, still staring at the announcement. When I'd started this journey, I'd been motivated partly by spite, partly by desperation. Now, those emotions had transformed into something much more powerful: genuine passion for the work and pride in what we'd built. My phone buzzed with a text from Daniel: signed lease on the new place. Keys next week. Dinner tonight to celebrate. Another milestone. After dating for a year, we were moving in together. Daniel understood me in ways no previous partner ever had. He valued my ambition, respected my boundaries with my family, and made me laugh even on the hardest days. My new life was taking shape in all the ways that mattered. Later that afternoon, my assistant Zoe knocked on my office door. Package for you. Looks fancy. The heavy cream envelope bore the embossed logo of Boston Magazine. Inside was a formal invitation to their annual Innovation Gala honoring business leaders and entrepreneurs from New England and beyond. A handwritten note was paperclipped to it: Madison, we'd be honored to have you attend as a featured speaker. Your journey from Boston to building a nationally recognized agency is exactly the kind of success story we want to highlight. I sat back in my chair, letting the irony wash over me. Boston, the city I'd fled, where I'd never been enough, now wanted to claim me as their success story. My first instinct was to decline. I had no interest in being paraded around as a prodigal daughter returned. But as I thought about it more, another perspective emerged. This wasn't about seeking validation from my hometown. It was about coming full circle, returning not as someone desperate for approval, but as someone who no longer needed it. I decided to accept. The evening of the gala, I stood in my hotel room overlooking Boston Common, applying the finishing touches to my makeup. I'd chosen a midnight blue gown that projected confidence and success, no more trying to blend in with pastels and pearls. My phone rang. Catherine. "Are you nervous about seeing everyone?" she asked after we'd exchanged greetings. Surprisingly, no, I realized. 2 years ago, I would have been a wreck. "You've changed," she said. "In good ways." "So have you," I pointed out. Catherine had gradually been setting her own boundaries with our parents, pursuing research interests that truly excited her rather than just advancing her career in the expected ways. "William's coming tonight," she added. "He wants to support you." My brother had undergone perhaps the most dramatic transformation of all. After his divorce, he'd taken a sabbatical from law to figure things out, something the old William would never have considered. He'd started therapy, reconnected with college interests in environmental advocacy, and was considering a career pivot to environmental law. "Dad's being weird about it," Catherine continued. "He keeps saying things like, 'I suppose we should support Madison's hobby.'" I laughed. "Some things never change. But some things do," she countered. "He's actually bragging to his partners about you. In his own backhanded way." The gala was held at the Boston Museum of Fine Arts, marble columns and soaring ceilings creating an atmosphere of gravitas. As I entered, I felt a peculiar sensation, like walking into a familiar dream but as a different person. These were the same social circles I'd grown up in, the same Boston elite who had measured and found me wanting. But now I moved through them differently, not as Richard Reynolds' disappointing daughter, but as Madison Reynolds' successful entrepreneur. I spotted my parents across the room, my mother elegant as always, my father distinguished in his tuxedo. They were speaking with the mayor and his wife, my mother laughing at something being said. Before I could decide whether to approach them, I was intercepted by the event organizer and whisked away to meet various sponsors and VIPs. By the time I reached the Reynolds family table, it was almost time for dinner. "Madison," my father said, rising to greet me formally. "You look professional." From him, this was a significant compliment. "Thank you, Dad. It's good to see you both." I turned to my mother. "Beautiful dress, Mom." "Thank you, dear. Valentino's new collection." She surveyed my gown. "Yours is quite striking as well. Very bold." William arrived moments later, giving me a genuine hug. The successful sister. Save me from an evening of hospital fundraising stories. Dinner was surprisingly pleasant. My parents' friends stopped by our table to congratulate me, many mentioning they'd read about my agency or seen our campaigns. With each interaction, I could see my father's perception shifting slightly. People he respected were treating his daughter as a peer. After the meal came the speeches and presentations. When the host announced me as one of the evening's featured speakers, I approached the podium with calm confidence. "Good evening," I began. "Some of you knew me when I was growing up here in Boston. Others know me only through my work in Chicago. But all of you probably know what it's like to have a moment that defines your life, that splits it cleanly into before and after." I paused, looking directly at my family's table. My moment came at a Thanksgiving dinner 2 years ago, when I was told I was the biggest disgrace to this family. Those words, spoken in anger but reflecting years of disappointed expectations, could have destroyed me. Instead, they freed me. A murmur rippled through the audience. My father's expression remained impassive, but my mother shifted uncomfortably in her seat. I realized that night that I'd spent my entire life trying to earn approval by following someone else's blueprint for success. When I finally let go of that need for external validation, I found something much more valuable: the courage to define success on my own terms. For the next 10 minutes, I spoke about authentic leadership, about building a company culture that valued diverse perspectives, about the marketing lessons learned from my own journey of finding and amplifying my genuine voice. I didn't air family dirty laundry or seek revenge through public shaming. This wasn't about hurting my parents, it was about owning my story. As I concluded, I looked again at my family table. Catherine was smiling proudly. William was nodding in recognition of shared experiences. My mother's expression was complex, pride and discomfort battling for dominance. And my father, stern, judgmental Richard Reynolds, was watching me with something I'd never seen before: respect. The applause was enthusiastic. As I made my way back to our table, colleagues and industry peers stopped me to share their appreciation for my candor. When I finally sat down, my father cleared his throat. That was unexpected, but well delivered. My mother quickly added, "You've always had a way with words, Madison." William raised his glass in a small toast to defining success on our own terms. After the formal program ended, my father approached me as I was speaking with the editor of Boston Business Journal. "Madison, might I have a word?" We stepped away to a quiet corner of the ballroom. For a moment, he seemed uncharacteristically hesitant. "Your speech was illuminating," he finally said. "I wasn't trying to embarrass you, Dad." "I know." He straightened his already perfect tie. "I'm not good at this sort of thing, Madison." Admitting miscalculations. Coming from Richard Reynolds, this was practically a confession of wrongdoing. "The fact is," he continued with obvious difficulty, "you've built something impressive. Not in the way I would have advised, but impressive nonetheless." "Thank you," I said simply. "I still don't understand half of what your company does," he admitted. "All that social media business seems rather ephemeral to me. But the results speak for themselves." He extended his hand formally, as if closing a business deal. I took it, recognizing this awkward gesture as the closest my father could come to an apology. "Perhaps next time you're in Boston, you might visit the house," he suggested. "Your mother would like that." It wasn't a full reconciliation. There were still fundamental differences in how we viewed the world, success, and family. But it was an acknowledgement, however limited, that I had earned a seat at the table, my own table, built on my own terms. Later that night, as Daniel and I talked on the phone, I tried to explain the significance of the evening. "It's not that I needed their approval," I clarified. "I really don't anymore. It's more that I can finally exist in their presence as myself, not as a disappointment." "That's huge," he said. "And from what you've told me about your father, the fact that he approached you is practically a papal dispensation." I laughed. "Something like that. We'll never have a Hallmark movie relationship, but maybe we can have something." "I'm proud of you," Daniel said. "Not for impressing your family, but for how far you've come on your own journey." As I fell asleep in my hotel room that night, I realized the truth in his words. The triumph wasn't in winning awards or impressing my father or being invited to speak at prestigious events. The real triumph was in the woman I had become, strong enough to succeed, yes, but more importantly, strong enough to define success for myself. The biggest disgrace to the family had found the greatest gift instead, the freedom to be authentically, unapologetically herself. 3 years have passed since that fateful Thanksgiving dinner when my father's words changed the trajectory of my life. Sometimes I think I should send him a thank you card. His cruel statement became the catalyst for my transformation. But of course, I never will. Some lessons are best left unspoken. My life now is almost unrecognizable from before. Authentic Edge Marketing has grown into a respected agency with offices in Chicago and New York, multiple industry awards, and a client list that includes several Fortune 500 companies. We've been featured in major business publications, and I've been invited to speak at marketing conferences across the country. But the professional success, gratifying as it is, isn't what brings me the most pride. It's the personal growth, the journey from seeking external validation to finding internal peace. Daniel proposed 6 months ago, on a random Tuesday evening while we were cooking dinner in our apartment. No elaborate setup, no audience, just a quiet moment of genuine connection. "I love who you are," he said, "not who you might become or who others expect you to be." Coming from a family where marriages were strategic alliances more than love matches, his simple authenticity felt revolutionary. The engagement ring isn't the enormous diamond my mother would have expected, but a unique emerald design we chose together. When I called to tell my parents, my mother's first question was predictably about carrots and clarity. But her second question surprised me. Are you happy, Madison? That simple question represented significant progress. My relationship with my family has evolved into something I never imagined possible. It's not perfect or even entirely comfortable, but it's honest in a way it never was before. Catherine has become one of my closest friends and confidants. After seeing my journey, she's made subtle but important changes in her own life, pursuing research interests she's passionate about rather than just focusing on career advancement. She's still very much a Reynolds, organized, ambitious, traditional, but now on her own terms. William's transformation has been even more dramatic. After his divorce, he took a sabbatical from corporate law to reassess his life choices. He's now working for an environmental nonprofit, using his legal skills to fight climate change, something he actually cares about. Our father still refers to this as his idealistic phase, but William seems happier and healthier than I've ever seen him. My parents remain my parents, traditional, sometimes judgmental, often challenging. But they've learned to respect boundaries, at least most of the time. My mother still sends helpful articles about diets and wrinkle creams. My father still offers unsolicited business advice. But the underlying current of disappointment has been replaced by a grudging respect. Last month, I received an unexpected invitation. My parents wanted me to attend Christmas dinner in Boston. After discussing it with Daniel and my therapist, I decided to accept, but with conditions. We would stay at a hotel, not the family home. We would visit for dinner only, not the entire holiday, and at the first sign of old patterns re-emerging, we would leave. Setting these boundaries would have been unthinkable to the old Madison. Walking into my parents' house on Christmas Eve was surreal. The same perfect decorations, the same formal dining room, the same family portraits lining the hallway. But I was different. I wasn't entering as the perpetual disappointment, shoulders hunched against inevitable criticism. I walked in as a successful woman comfortable in her own skin. Dinner began with typical Reynolds formality, but then something unexpected happened. My father stood to offer his traditional Christmas toast, crystal glass raised. To family, he began as he always did. But then he departed from the script. And to growth. This year has brought changes, some welcome, some challenging. William has found a new path. Catherine has secured an important research grant. And Madison. He paused, meeting my eyes directly. Madison has shown us all that success can look different than we imagined. That building something meaningful requires courage as well as determination. It has taken me too long to recognize that. My mother dabbed at her eyes with her linen napkin. William looked stunned. Catherine squeezed my hand under the table. It wasn't a full apology for years of criticism and dismissal. It wasn't a Hollywood moment of complete reconciliation. But it was real. And for the Reynolds family, it was revolutionary. After dinner, Catherine pulled me aside. You changed everything, you know. When you left that Thanksgiving, it was like a spell broke. We all had to look at ourselves differently. I didn't do it to change the family, I told her. I did it to save myself. I know, she said. That's why it worked. As Daniel and I prepared to leave, my father awkwardly handed me a small wrapped package. For the engagement, he said gruffly. Inside was a pair of antique emerald earrings that had belonged to my grandmother. Not the perfect Reynolds daughter Catherine, but to me, the family disgrace. The symbolism wasn't lost on me. Back in our hotel room, Daniel asked if I was okay. I realized, somewhat surprised. They're never going to fully change. My mother will always care too much about appearances. My father will always be controlling in his way. But they're trying. And more importantly, I've changed how I respond to them. The truth is, some people never fully transform. My parents are in their 70s, shaped by generations of tradition and privilege. Their idea of family and success is deeply ingrained. But they've learned, however imperfectly, to make space for different versions of success. And I've learned to find peace with that imperfection. The greatest gift of these 3 years hasn't been professional success or even family reconciliation. It's been building my chosen family, friends who love me without conditions, colleagues who respect my vision, a partner who celebrates my authentic self. Every Sunday, we host dinner at our apartment, an eclectic gathering of friends, coworkers, and neighbors. There's no dress code, no formal seating arrangement, no pressure to impress. Just good food, honest conversation, and genuine connection. The Anti-Reynolds gathering. Sometimes I think about that terrified young woman driving aimlessly through Boston after being called a disgrace, crying by the harbor, wondering if she would ever be enough. I wish I could tell her what I know now. Being rejected for who you truly are is painful but liberating. It forces you to decide what you really value and who you want to become. Setting boundaries with toxic family members isn't selfish, it's necessary for healing. Success defined by others will never satisfy you. True fulfillment comes from living authentically, even when that path looks nothing like what others expected for you. Sometimes the harshest criticism becomes your greatest gift if it pushes you toward your authentic self rather than further away from it. The most powerful response to being called a disgrace isn't argument or revenge. It's building a life so authentically successful that those words lose all their power. And finally, sometimes the family you create matters more than the family you were born into. I'm not grateful for the pain my family caused me growing up. I don't believe suffering is necessary for growth. But I am grateful for who I've become through the process of healing, stronger, more compassionate, and uncompromisingly authentic. Being called the biggest disgrace to this family was meant to be the ultimate condemnation. Instead, it became my greatest liberation, the moment I stopped trying to earn love through achievement and started building a life that actually made me happy. So if you're watching this and feeling like you'll never measure up to someone else's expectations, whether family, friends, or society, remember that their disappointment might be pointing you toward your most authentic path. Sometimes the greatest gift is being freed from the need for approval. Have you ever had a moment when someone's criticism accidentally pushed you toward a better life? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments. If this resonated with you, please like and subscribe for more authentic conversations. And remember, sometimes being a disgrace to other people's expectations is the first step to honoring your own truth. Thank you for listening to my story, and I wish you the courage to write your own, no matter what anyone else might think of the plot.